Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Planet Futbol. We're here to break down all the biggest and most important stories happening in the football world. Today we'll be speaking with US men's national team coach Gregg Berhalter as well as Guillaume Balaguer of the BBC. I'm Grant Wahl, and I'm joined this week by SI's Laken Litman to catch up on the latest in women's soccer. Laken, great to have you on.
Great to be back.
Yeah, lots to talk about too. We're speaking on Thursday afternoon. The US women have another victory tour game Thursday night versus Portugal before a big crowd in Philadelphia. Megan Rapinoe is still out with an Achilles injury and has yet to play since the World Cup at all. Are you concerned about this, or is it a sign that maybe women's players should get a month off after the World Cup after winning it like the men's players get to do?
Well, given that it's an Achilles, I think you should always kind of be a little concerned about an Achilles, but if Megan could play, she could play. And, you know, her club team knows that, the US women's national team knows that. Having said all that, yes, I 100% agree that the women need time off after winning the World Cup, especially if that's what the men get. I mean, but I also think that, you know, after a World Cup, as emotional and mental, like all that, you know, mentally charged, that you need time to cool off. You need to come back. You can't just go back into your normal everyday schedule. That's just not fair. And Megan is nursing an injury and she wants to be back with her team. She wants to play in the Olympics, so they need some time off.
I think it would be nice if they did. I understand all the desire to get the NWSL going, and they've had a good post-World Cup bump, but maybe they could have had a little more time off, I think. There's not that much time until the Olympics, so I think that's something to keep in mind too. And Megan Rapinoe's got a lot on her plate. She has a book coming out around the Olympics that she's got to write with somebody, in addition to all the other stuff that she's been doing. She's obviously handled everything very well, but you know, like to see her back on the field at some point.
Especially she has brighter pink hair now. I don't know if you saw.
I saw.
Yeah, it's like cotton candy or something. But I also wanted to talk to you about Kate Markgraf has been hired as the U.S. Women's General Manager, and her first task is to hire a new coach to replace Jill Ellis. Who do you want to see as the choice?
I mean, I think the most likely scenario is Laura Harvey at this point. She's the coach of the Utah Royals in the NWSL. She's had a lot of success in the league. English coach. She's had success in Europe too. She knows the player pool. And also I thought it was interesting that Kate Markgraf, I asked her the day that she took the job as women's GM, all of the things being equal, would you prefer to hire a woman as the coach of the U.S. women's team? And she said yes. So Laura Harvey's really the only candidate that's a woman right now, the only serious one. And so maybe there's just, you know, one or two or three that we're missing. Maybe those folks will be interviewed. I know there's some good male candidates as well. But there's not a lot of time that you want to waste right now. And clearly Kate Markgraf, her biggest thing right now is to go through the process of hiring a new coach for the U.S. women's national team to replace Jill Ellis. That's going to happen, or that person's going to come in November after the victory tour is over. And then you've just got a matter of months to get ready for the Olympics.
Yeah. So they better make a decision pretty fast. I'm
Yes.
sure that she's been working on it. So.
Last week on the show, we had CARLI LLOYD, whose interest in becoming an NFL place kicker in 2020 appears to be serious. You cover American football as well, Laken. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, I'm for it. I mean, we know CARLI. She's super competitive, mentally tough, not afraid of anything, including a 300-pound lineman coming at her. But you know what? I think that if this is something that she wants to do, then the NFL team should give her a legitimate shot. I know that, you know, there have been some concerns given when she took the kick last week. You know, she had a longer run up and it would be much shorter. Well, she'll work on that if she gets a legit tryout. I mean, if it's James Galanis or someone, you know, more in tune with how NFL kicking works, she'll work on that tactic. People also are rightfully concerned about what if she has to play defense, or again, what if a 300-pound lineman is actually rushing her. There have been people who have said, well, maybe she'll take the kick and then run off the field, but I think she's too competitive for that. Not to say that somebody who's maybe like half the size of an NFL player could, you know, take a hit like that, but I think that, you know, this is something that, again, if she wants to do it, I'm all for it. And I think it would be really interesting if she got a legitimate tryout. what the NFL's response would be to having a woman want to play.
Oh yeah, I'd be excited to see something like this. If she takes it seriously, then I take her seriously. And so the one thing I would say is it's kind of crazy that if she theoretically were to make an NFL team, her salary would be quite a bit higher than what she has earned being the best soccer player in the world twice. And so I think that's kind of crazy. But her mentality, I've gotten to know pretty well over the years. And if she thinks she can do it, I think that could be a really fascinating story to follow. And she's mentally tougher than just about any athlete I have ever covered. So we'll see how she does if this thing goes forward. It also comes at a time in her career that she's winding things down in terms of soccer, and there's still questions about how involved she'll be with the national team, even for the Olympics, or will she be? Because there's only an 18-player roster.
Right.
So I think this is going to be a fun story to follow on an ongoing basis, and we'll see where it takes us.
Also, one more thing to add, that I liked her attitude about being a pioneer in this. And, if she does well, then maybe the NFL starts to dip more into the NWSL. Who knows? I mean, there's plenty of NFL kickers who are former soccer players, so, we'll see how that goes. The NWSL has gotten a big post-World Cup bump, and last week we saw the Washington Spirit draw more than 19,000 fans to their first game this season at the MLS Stadium in urban DC. We recently saw Sky Blue FC get a record crowd in their game at the MLS Stadium in New Jersey. How important do you think it is for NWSL teams to be playing in bigger and more easily reached MLS stadiums like these?
Terribly, terribly important, because especially when you look at in Washington, D.C., the place where they typically play their NWSL games is way out in the boonies,
Right.
and people I know there who want to go see games have to do trains, planes, and automobiles basically just to get there. They literally have to switch one or two times if you don't have a car. And that's terribly frustrating. It drives down crowds, and we're seeing that with these crowds they're getting, NWSL teams, in MLS stadiums, soccer stadiums, that it's possible to do that and get a crowd. So I really hope that we see this happen a lot more, and even on a permanent basis. There's no reason that Sky Blues should be playing at Rutgers if they can play at Red Bull Arena and get more people from New York to go out there on public transport and see their games. And so I hope these types of decisions get made. I think it's kind of crazy, actually, that Seattle gets such huge crowds in their NFL stadium for the Sounders and MLS, but then you would think they would get better crowds for the women's team up there that's playing Tacoma right now. And what would happen if you really got behind that? I think Megan Rapinoe's made that point as well recently. So the more MLS teams and stadiums involved in the NWSL, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's great news that Atlanta appears to be interested in starting an NWSL team as part of Atlanta United. Sacramento, which could be coming into MLS, has interest as well. So to me, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And just to add one more point, we talk about this World Cup bump. It obviously is, but if they made this more permanent, then we wouldn't maybe be talking about a bump after the Olympics.
Correct.
Or the next World Cup. It'll just become normal.
Yeah, totally agree. On September 23rd in Milan, FIFA will present its annual awards. Who do you think deserves to be named the world's Player of the Year in women's soccer? Megan Rapinoe or Ada Hegerberg, or as we learned today, Lucy Bronze apparently was the UEFA Player of the Year, so maybe she's in the mix.
I know we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I'm Megan Rapinoe. I mean, she was the star of the World Cup, Golden Boot, Golden Ball, Twitter spat with President Trump, gave an impassioned speech about equal pay at the ticker tape parade. I realize this award is not about those latter things, but when it comes to what she accomplished and the way that she led this team in France, Ada Hegerberg, if we're pitting the two against each other, really, she didn't even play in the World Cup, citing equal pay issues with Norway. So this year, best player in the world, Megan Rapinoe.
I think because it's a World Cup year that Megan Rapinoe is going to win this award, and typically we've seen, whether it's men's or women's soccer, that if you're the best player in the World Cup, that you then become the World Player of the Year that year. Hegerberg had a heck of a European campaign for Lyon, hat trick in the Champions League final, but I do wonder if she would have had a better argument for this award if she had played in the World Cup. You would certainly think so. And we'll see if Lucy Bronze finds a way to get in there as well. I was slightly surprised to see her beat Hegerberg for UEFA Player of the Year, but Lucy Bronze did play in the World Cup. So
we'll theme there.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. But the thing I'm looking most forward to is if Megan Rapinoe wins World Player of the Year and gets to give a speech in front of everyone at FIFA, you can be pretty certain that that's going to be a fun speech to listen to.
Oh yeah, that's probably the dream right now. Dream scenario, not just for her, but for her teammates. Like, you get up on that stage and you got the biggest platform that you possibly can have. So the ticker tape parade was probably just a preview of what's to come there.
Joining me now is Gregg Berhalter, the coach of the U.S. men's national team, which has games on September 6th against Mexico and September 10th against Uruguay. Gregg, thanks for coming back on the show.
Hey, Grant, how you doing?
Doing well. Looking forward to you guys coming here to New York next week. Gregg, you announced your roster on Wednesday, and one intriguing player on it is right back Sergiño Dent from Ajax. What did you think of his performance in Champions League qualifying this week, and how confident are you that the Dutch American will eventually choose to commit to playing for the United States?
Well, I think Sergiño did extremely well in that game. Not only that game, but in his preseason, in the games leading up to that, the league games, he started the season really well. And it's nice to see the flexibility that he plays with, the ability to come inside or stay wide, play on the left or play on the right. I think he's, definitely can be an asset for our team in the fullback position, which traditionally we haven't had the depth that we'd like. In terms of his future with the United States team, he played for our under-20 team in the World Cup. He's extremely enthusiastic about joining the team now. When I called him and talked about him joining the senior national team, he was ecstatic. And our job is to create the right environment, put him in position to be able to progress and succeed. And I'm confident that he'll be a member of the men's national team.
Obviously, recruiting dual national players is always going to be part of what U.S. Soccer does. Specifically, how do you want to see the Federation organize the recruiting of dual nationals?
So we have a process, and it's about being systematic in how we communicate with the players. Who's communicating with them based on their age. How open are we communicating? How often are we communicating with them? And then I think it's about creating the right environment where they know they can come in and get better and enjoy being in our environment. And once we do that, there's not much more we can do after that. And then it's going to be a personal decision, after talking to their family, and hopefully we'll come out on the right end of it more often than not.
Also on this roster, Gregg, is Christian Pulisic. What are your thoughts on his start so far at Chelsea, and how do you want to use Christian for your U.S. team?
So I think that, when I'm watching him play, I'm really happy with how he started the season because, not only did he come into preseason fit and strong, you can see that he's adapting to the English game, and that's what's important. His performances are improving. I think he's in a position where the coach trusts him, and the coach gives him the freedom to make plays and to get goals and get assists. And Christian's been embracing that. I think we're excited for him at Chelsea, but also excited for what he can do for us. And I've always said we want to put Christian in position to affect the game, and whether that's wide going 1-versus-1 or in the pockets, turning and attacking the defense. So we want him to be a playmaker for us.
Meanwhile, Josh Sargent is back with the senior national team after not being involved in this summer's Gold Cup or the Under-20 World Cup. What went into your decision to bring Sargent back now?
So I liked what I've seen with him in preseason. When I'm looking at some of these games, when I'm looking at him against Everton, when I'm looking at him, in other games, he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. And he took the disappointment of not making the Gold Cup team and used that as fuel to improve and be hungry and really stake a claim for a spot at Bremen. Now, the beginning of the season hasn't turned out exactly how he'd want it, but it's a process. And just like he showed in preseason, we're confident he's going to come back strong.
Gregg, you left 3 Toronto players, Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, and Omar Gonzalez, out of your roster due to Toronto having playoff race MLS games during the FIFA window. You mentioned this week you were disappointed that MLS has big games during the international break. What would you like to see happen in the future?
So I understand that, there's not the flexibility in scheduling. When you talk about New York City FC that doesn't control their stadium, they have very little flexibility with their fixture. So I understand there's going to be games sometimes in FIFA windows. I would like that, the teams didn't play on FIFA windows. I'd like that we're able to use the players during those times. Having said that, I also understand that, we just took the players away from their season in the Gold Cup, and they missed a large portion of the season due to the Gold Cup. So it is a give and take, Grant. And that's why in this situation and other situations, we are working with the clubs because we understand what they're going through.
I want to wrap up with something. It's kind of a random question, but I'm curious. Recently, FIFA decided to allow coaching staffs to use video analysis tools on the bench during games. And I was just wondering, how exactly do you and your staff use those tools?
So it's been helpful so far. We're still not at the point where we're using data in games to make decisions on players, whether that's fitness decisions or tactical decisions. But in terms of reviewing the game, being able to identify phases of the game and review them, it's extremely helpful.
Very interesting. Well, Gregg Berhalter, thanks so much for coming back on the show. We'll see you next week here in New York.
Thanks, Grant. Good seeing you.
Joining us now is the BBC's Guillaume Balaguer, the world's leading journalist and commentator in English on Spanish football, who also covers the sport in England and elsewhere. He's also written terrific books on Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Pep Guardiola, and Mauricio Pochettino. And you should definitely subscribe to Guillaume's YouTube page. Guillaume, thanks for coming on the show.
You're definitely a friend, Grant.
Great to have you on. Lots to talk about here. You have been all over the potential Neymar transfer every step of the way. We're speaking on Thursday afternoon, your time in Europe, late morning here in New York. What is the latest on Neymar?
These things are moving very, very fast. A few days ago, I think it was Tuesday, we heard one of the directors of Barcelona saying that they were closer, that it was getting closer for Neymar to come to Barcelona. But all he meant was that the conversations continue. There was a suggestion last night that PSG had rejected the latest offer from Barcelona. In fact, what had happened is that, yes, rejected it, but the conversations continued. Now I'm hearing from different parts of the deal that basically they're very close. That's the words, those are the words that I'm using. And they also say every half an hour this could change. But clubs seem to have a little bit of an agreement, a little bit, or a big agreement, as you're about to hear, because we're talking about a value of over 200 million euros, which will be cash and players. Barcelona have always said, we need to give you players. Money-wise, we don't have enough to give you cash. So the suggestion is that Todibo, the centre-back, could go to PSG, Rakitic could go to PSG, and Dembélé could actually go on loan to PSG. But this is where the complicated part starts, because the players have not agreed it yet. And Dembélé, Moussa Sissoko, you must remember him from his time at Liverpool, he's Dembélé's agent. And he said yesterday 200%, which is mathematically it's not possible, but you know what he's trying to say. He will stay at Barcelona. This is his own agent. But for the whole thing to happen, Barcelona have to get rid of 1 or 1.5 of the top wages at the club. Otherwise, they won't be able to bring Neymar. They won't be able to put his wages in the wage list. That's what La Liga have told Barcelona. So they need to get rid of 1.5 or 2 top players, as well as anybody else that will release more money so they can pay the wages of Neymar. The big mystery is, how can Barcelona pay so much money as well as handing over players?
You know, Neymar's in a different place in his career now than when he first moved to PSG. What do you think it will take for him to sort of revive his career?
I've always discussed that with Barcelona, he felt frustrated because he was caged He had to do a role, a very clear role. You stay on the left-hand side, you run in behind, obviously use your talent to beat defenders because we'll create superiority where you are, and then try to beat them and feed a lot of balls to Messi as well. Caged. He wanted more, and he wanted PSG for that. But I think he felt frustrated from the beginning. If he's honest, he will tell us the story of how in the first few months after going to PSG, he thought, I got it wrong. The problem is he actually left Barcelona in bad terms. He lied to the directors that are now paying this much money for him to go. And also he's taking Barcelona. There's a couple of court cases against Barcelona, himself against Barcelona. So morally, ethically, there is so many people against all of this. So it's not so much what will Neymar do. Will he be happy to be caged again? Because he'll have to in the type of football, positional football that Barcelona plays. But also, how will he be accepted? Players, yes, they want him back. But fans and the commentators, they just cannot believe that Barcelona is a club that is already mortgaged because they had to ask for a loan deal for Griezmann. Actually, they're going and trying to do this with Neymar.
Wow. We have yet to see Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez play for Barcelona this season. Once they are back, what do you think Ernesto Valverde's biggest challenges will be managing his team this season?
To include Griezmann in that equation, in that front three. It was interesting to see a team without Luis Suarez and without Messi against Betis. They beat Betis 5-2. It was a team that was sharp, that was quick, that wanted the ball back, were hungry, pressured high, did it constantly. Really good performance. And top of that was Griezmann, who scored 2 goals and led the side. So you're thinking, obviously Messi has to come back, but is Luis Suarez needed? When you have Griezmann, I think that the fear of Griezmann is that if Neymar comes in, he will be the one pushed aside. Not so much because of his performances, but because that chemistry that is between the front three, Neymar, Luis Suarez and Messi. In my eyes, the one that you have to get rid of, and I know this will be controversial, and I haven't heard anybody saying this, but it's Luis Suarez. You have to have, in my eyes, you have to have Messi, you have to have Griezmann, and then, not necessarily the biggest names, but a Carlos Perez, for instance, or somebody. Carlos Perez, think of Pedro. Remember when he first broke into the scene? Hungry, wanted the ball back, worked really hard. If you have him, then I think you get Griezmann and him doing that, working hard. Messi doesn't have to. Or if you have Luis Suarez, the pressure high breaks down because he's not one working hard when they lose the ball. Plus, he's been missing a lot of chances. So we'll see. But it's a bit of a headache for Valverde.
Meanwhile, Zinedine Zidane still has Gareth Bale at Real Madrid, among other players. What do you think Zidane will be trying to accomplish during his first full season back at the club?
Well, he's got to win the next game, and he's got to do it convincingly. And that's honestly, that's the priority, because now you have so many people doubting him, including people at the top. So he needs to win games. After drawing against Valladolid, one of the teams with the lowest budget in the division, you thought, okay, is it an accident or not? The conclusion for most people is that it's not. The first half looked like a good Real Madrid. The second half looked like last season Real Madrid. And you had in the team James and Bale and Isco and Kroos and people that had not played together since 2014 or, all this period. It's the same side. So no sharpers, nothing new, no new blood, only Hazard out of the new players will be added to the usual lineup. And people are starting to question that that's the right policy. Why not use, Jovic, for instance? Why not use Mendy when he's available? And he won't. He will use Marcelo and he will use Benzema. So no much different from Real Madrid. And honestly, it just looks like an old side.
As for Atletico Madrid, how serious do you think their title hopes are this season? And how good is Joao Felix, in your opinion?
Joao Felix is really good, honestly. 127 million euros. Soon we will be saying, well, yes, it was worth it. And he's got to do it consistently, to be honest. He's only had two great moves. One became a goal, the one handing the ball to Vitola for the goal that won the game for Atletico Madrid. And in the previous game against Getafe, he did a fantastic move that became a penalty missed by Morata. So he's got a lot of talent. He's got to adapt to Simeone's role without the ball, and he's got to do it consistently. But if he grows in the way I think he will, we'll be talking in a couple of years as one of the top 5 players in the world. And Atletico Madrid, we know what they like. It's 5-6 new players into the lineup. Simeone will do it his way with a team that won't be brilliant, but will be effective. And yes, I think they can take advantage of a Real Madrid that's still not there. I'm not sure they can catch a Barcelona. Remember, the front 3-4 for Barcelona is perhaps the best in the world.
Moving back to England, you know Mauricio Pochettino well from writing a book on him. How frustrated is he right now about the Christian Eriksen situation? And what has happened between him and Jan Vertonghen to make Vertonghen so out of favor?
Well, these are players that are finishing contracts, and even though they've been proposed, especially in the case of Eriksen, for him to renew his contract, he doesn't want to do it. As you know, his contract finishes at the end of the season. So just generally, I think the frustration comes from 3 years now, 3 summers in which he thought, right, start of a new cycle. Oh, we cannot sign. No. It's not that they cannot sign, but simply that they didn't sign for 2 windows. That has meant that players he's had, and the regular ones in the lineup, some of them have been 5 years with him. I think he's up to thinking that the cycle of a team is about 4 years. So he's stretching a little bit too much. People get tired of the same voices, the same messages, and he hasn't been able to recycle in the way that he would like even this summer, because we are talking about 3 new players coming in. But I think the plan was 5 or 6. We still got the possibility of changing players in January, but right now he's going to have to deal with more or less the same guys with 3 new additions. Not enough for what he wants to do, this recycling that he needs to do for the side. So that's frustrating, because that means that the players give a little bit less, and if Spurs are not 100%, they become a much, much, much worse team.
Guillaume Balaguer, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Same to you, Carl.
And now for this week's parting shot. MLS has created a problem with some of its most devoted fans. On national television last week, the Timbers Army supporters group in Portland protested the league's recently updated code of conduct by refusing to make any noise for the first 33 minutes of a game against Seattle. The code prohibits political messages on banners in stadiums. And while a few fans seem to have an issue with banning pro-Trump or pro-Biden banners, the Timbers Army has a very big problem with the league prohibiting banners showing the symbol of the anti-fascist Iron Front. The league says the Iron Front is a symbol of Antifa, which it considers to be a political organization. I get that making policies like this is a complex issue, but MLS could have done things better here. For starters, just as different parts of the country have different politics and ideas of what the word politics actually means these days, hardcore soccer fans in Portland and Seattle are simply different from hardcore fans in, say, Dallas or Orlando. I would have favored individual clubs working with their own supporters groups to develop individual policies rather than have MLS HQ mandate one code of conduct for the entire league. But if it was going to make one league-wide policy, MLS also should have included the supporters groups from the start in the process of updating its code of conduct. This week I was told that the Independent Supporters Council, which advocates for fair treatment of supporters in the US and Canada, had tried to engage with the league on this topic, but the league had not engaged back. Now, however, a league official tells me that MLS will engage with supporters groups on the code of conduct issue. Here's hoping they can find a solution that suits both sides. MLS's most devoted fans are too important to leave them out of the policymaking process on such a meaningful issue. That's it for this week's episode of Planet Football, episode 84. Thanks for joining us, and catch us right here every week on Thursdays on SITV, YouTube, or SI.com. Take care.